And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata. And first of all, Happy New Year. Happy 2024. Not only do we have great expectations with the new year, but New Year brings in a new season of Major League Rugby. And even though this isn't a preview video per se of the upcoming 2024 season, which will start to come out eventually as we get closer to season kickoff, which is going to be in, oh good lord, just about 2 months. There has been some big news in regards to Major League Rugby and the possibility of a new franchise. Or new franchise, new team, that might be kind of more the vernacular that we should use. But if anything, there is a new Major League Rugby team. Who are they? What are they going to be doing in this league? And how can we have a new team announced 2 months within the new season? And again, the schedule was just released for a second time before the inclusion of LA and Miami. So I'm going to go through all of that with what we know by Rugby411. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, and welcome to Major League Rugby, the new Charlotte franchise. That's right, there will be a 12th Major League Rugby team based in Charlotte, North Carolina. They will be playing in this year's 2024 Major League Rugby season. So yes, scheduling will have to be shifted around possibly again. There is word that a good majority of the season will still try to be kept intact. Which, of course, for fans that have already started to make plans, that does kind of change things a little bit, but it kind of is what it is. But there will be a 12th rugby team for the 2024 season, which is crazy to imagine. Just about a month ago, we already had 2 teams fall out without any kind of warning, Toronto and New York, and now we have the inclusion of a brand new team with the Charlotte team, and of course the shift of Atlanta over to LA. So yeah, 12 teams. Also to the announcement that the conference alignment will now go back to 2 conferences, a West and an East. The West side will of course have Seattle, Utah, San Diego, the new Rugby Football Club Los Angeles, Houston, and Dallas, 2 Texas teams. And then the East will include the new Charlotte team, New England, DC Old Glory, NOLA, and the new Miami, and of course Chicago Hounds. So no announcement on which teams or how playoffs are going to work. Obviously the whole 8-team playoff system will probably be thrown out, though maybe they'll have the top 4 teams in each conference make it this time around. We'll see. But definitely, I may be alone on this. Write down in the comments if you agree with me on this. But I do like more of an even number of teams. I'm not a big fan of odd numbers. So an even 12 sounds really great. But let's get into this now. Who is this Charlotte team, and how did this start to happen? The Charlotte team is actually let's say an evolution of the USA Hawks program. Now the Hawks program, if you're not very familiar with, the National American team, the USA Eagles, is the top tier level for USA players to represent America. Now, many countries have a secondary national team, usually with the vernacular of 15 attached to it, or X5. Japan has an X5. Actually, Japan sometimes calls their X5 the Sunwolves. Argentina has an X5. South Africa has an X5. Lots of teams have a second-tier team, which basically includes players that are kind of on that fringe of possibly becoming national players, but on, just developing, and as well as getting young, talented players to give them a little bit of a taste of international competition, traveling around the world, facing off against other young developing players. USA recently created the Hawks program. The Hawks team recently, as in last year, did a nice little tour of South America facing off against a lot of the Super Rugby America's teams over there, as well as hosting a couple of those teams in their base in North Carolina. So basically, this team is going to be that Hawks program now more developed and evolved, and having those players not just play on an international level, but now play on a pro level in the United States in Major League Rugby. This came about because of an agreement between USA Rugby, Major League Rugby, and World Rugby. World Rugby is the organization that runs all of union rugby around the world. They are the ones that back the World Cup. They are the ones that back the HSBC Sevens program. They are the ones that make the huge rankings for the global level. So World Rugby, having their involvement in this is huge because it really does show that they want rugby to develop in America. And having this now Charlotte program evolve, this Hawks program evolve into the Charlotte team, really is going to allow young USA players who are working their way to get to the Eagles program now have another pathway into becoming pro players on a professional level. So the team is really looking for a lot of 20-something players, young players that are USA eligible or close to the 5-year residency, which allows foreign players to be able to play for the USA national team if they are selected to be an Eagle. So that is the focus purely on this team. Now, with that being said, that does kind of give the Charlotte team a little bit of a handicap because instead of being filled with a lot more foreign players, a lot more veteran players, purposely this team is being filled with young, developing players. It's going to be a little bit interesting and definitely a different take than what most American sports fans are used to, where almost all teams are pretty much even skill level. I mean, not super even, but this is almost like basically taking a minor league team and shoving them up into the majors, is what this Charlotte team is. Not very traditional in America, but it has occurred in rugby around the world. Scotland's local rugby program, Scottish Rugby, does have a team that is purposely used to develop Scottish players, to then develop them into playing on the Scottish national team. So, and I believe somewhere in, I think Fiji does this as well. So it's not super popular, obviously, here in America, but it is something that does occur around the world in rugby and in other sports as well. So that's what this Charlotte team is. So, with that being said, is this necessarily fair for Charlotte? Well, maybe not. Again, we're not expecting this Charlotte team to technically make it to the Major League Rugby Shield, but it is a great way to develop young U.S. players or U.S. eligible players in their pathway to becoming not necessarily only playing for the USA Eagles, but also, again, being put into the spotlight on a national level. Also, too, what this Charlotte team does is it allows players that unfortunately were dropped from Toronto, dropped from Atlanta, dropped from New York, franchises that unfortunately had to close their doors. That did leave a lot of players without teams, without places to be. And so the Charlotte now opens that door now to those players again. Also, too, for a lot of, some criticism for Major League Rugby is that for the young American players, a lot of these franchises don't necessarily want them to be filling the ranks of teams. They would rather have, obviously, more experienced veterans, more big-name players. So a lot of the spaces and a lot of criticism of Major League Rugby is these American teams. I mean, look at the Dallas Jackals, for example, filled with Argentinian players. The Miami team is looking to be also filled with a lot of Argentinian players. Teams that are filled with a lot of foreign players. So where is the opportunity for these young American players in American rugby? Charlotte is that team that the focus is on the young American players. Again, Will that necessarily put them on the same playing field? No, it definitely will give them a handicap, but it will help develop them, this is a great opportunity, and I feel a great way to start really pushing for that development of American rugby as we march our way to hosting the Rugby World Cup here in America in 2031, which, now that we're in 2024, is just around the corner. So, also further news on this team, there will be an expansion draft. Though, what this Charlotte team will be mostly composed of are players that are on the current Hawks roster. So right now, rumor is the name for this team will be the Charlotte Hawks. But there will be an expansion draft. Every current Major League Rugby team will put up 2 players that are eligible for this draft. Whether or not they will be signed by the Charlotte team, that's up to the Charlotte team to do that, but they will be eligible for the team. Again, the focus, though, on the players that are being put up for the draft are in their mid-20s, USA eligible, or at least close to that 5-year residency so they can play as USA Eagles. Again, really focusing on that developing young American players purposely for the Charlotte team. Usually on the rosters for Major League Rugby rules for the Game Day 23, there is a cap of 10 foreign players on each team. For the Charlotte team, there will only be 6. So again, they're really focusing on giving young American eligible players the opportunity to play on the starting roster for the Charlotte team. The Charlotte home will be where the Hawks are playing right now, the American Legion Memorial Stadium, which is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's almost 100 years old. It's a relatively old stadium. It just was renovated. Originally held 21,000 seats, now holds 10,500 seats, but that still makes it the 5th largest stadium currently in Major League Rugby, right behind the SeatGeek Stadium, where the Chicago Hounds play, with 20,000, behind Dignity Health Sports Park, which is the new stadium home to the LA Rugby Football Club, which holds 27,000, and then Snapdragon Stadium, which is the home to the San Diego Legion, 35,000, and of course, Choctaw Stadium, home to the Dallas Jackals, which holds 48,000, the biggest stadium in Major League Rugby currently right now. So, one of the bigger stadiums for Major League Rugby, which that's great for building up that Charlotte fan base. And the rumor is the coach of the Charlotte team may be current Eagles head coach Scott Lawrence, who was the former Rugby ATL coach that brought Rugby ATL to the Rugby Championship a couple years back. So that will be very interesting. Also, too, great because you have the current Eagles head coach scouting and working with future Eagles players. I think that makes perfect sense. I think that's really great if that happens. It really does create that pathway for these potential Eagle players to make their way onto the roster working with the current Eagles head coach. Yeah, it's again, I think this is really great news. It will be made official in the next coming weeks or so. Again, this will throw off the schedule right now. So if you were planning on buying tickets or thinking about making road trips, pump the brakes on that, because adding in this 12 team obviously will change things up a little bit. But yeah, again, I think this is awesome. As I was getting this video ready, I was thinking, you know what? I'm thinking the Charlotte Hawks, if that's what they're going to be called, may be my honorary second team to root for, because I really do want the U.S. to develop into a rugby Tier 1 country. I mean, obviously, it's going to be very hard to be a Tier 1 country, but definitely a Tier 2 country or a higher Tier 2 country, somewhere around where Japan and Fiji are right now. Would love USA to be on that level on a consistent base too. Not just once in a while we have the talent. Year after year after year. Be on that competitive level with South Africa, with New Zealand, with England and Australia and Ireland. Oh God, Ireland right now being so huge and competitive. France. You know, being on that level with all those great teams, those great rugby countries. I would love us, because I don't feel there's any reason why it couldn't be. We just need the development system. We need to give these athletic players who may not even realize that they're rugby players the opportunity to show that they can be competitive at the top level, and all the great perks that comes from being a top-level athlete here in America in a very great sport like rugby. So, yeah, I think, honestly, with this new Charlotte team, I definitely feel they will become my secondary team, and I'm rooting for them to help root and develop for USA Rugby. And again, if you are going to be a rugby fan that really wants to root for the USA Eagles, you might as well start looking at the Charlotte team, because that roster, you will probably see future Eagles players on that roster and see their development. Again, I think it's awesome. If you're any kind of sports fan and you love watching these players develop from the high school to the college to the pro level, rugby is starting to do the same thing. We are starting to really focus on college rugby. We have the MLR draft now, going into Major League Rugby, going into now possibly joining the Eagles program and being a national player on the national level, going to the World Cup. There is a pathway now. And I feel, hey, if you want to play rugby, now is the time to get into it, because it is going to become something, hopefully, that is not only popular, but lucrative and very productive on your part as an athlete. So I think it's great. Again, we'll break more news on as it develops and everything's made official, but that is the news now. Thought you guys would love to hear about it. A 12th Major League Rugby team. Again, who'd have thought in just within the span of a couple months, we go to losing 2 teams, Toronto and New York, moving a franchise over, and now all of a sudden we have another franchise and we're back up to 12. It's pretty impressive. And we haven't even started the MLR 2024 season yet. So, and speaking of that season, again, I will be releasing preview videos. Now with the way that the teams are, I might have to go back to the way I did it before, where there's an Eastern and Western Conference preview. Maybe I'll do it in 2 parts, 3 teams each part. But definitely a lot of things to go over. Obviously now with this development, gotta wait to see what the rosters are going to be, especially with the Charlotte team. If you're interested, I definitely covered the LA team already. I'll put that video link in the comments below. So if you missed out on the fact that we do have an LA team, a brand new LA team, which I at least put my deposit for season tickets on. Check that out. And yeah, it's again, this is really great news for Major League Rugby fans and great news for fans in Charlotte. So you guys have a Major League Rugby team in your hometown. So thank you very much for joining me on this video. As always, thank you for your support. Happy New Year. Looking forward to seeing what 2024 has for us and in store for USA Rugby. And as always, I'll see you guys on the pitch.